Welcome back. A new congressional report released this week revealed more about the 51 ex-intelligence officials who signed that letter calling Hunter Biden's laptop Russian disinformation just weeks before the 2020 election. The report cites former CIA acting director Michael Morell, among others, working with the CIA. Morell previously told Congress that he helped organize that letter after then Biden senior campaign official, now Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, called him, reached out to him days after the New York Post broke the Hunter Biden laptop story. The CIA says both Morell and former CIA Inspector General David Buckley had contracts with the agency on the day the letter was released, October 19, 2020. The CIA also adds both Morell and Buckley held agency clearance at that time. The New York Post reports Morell denies that he was a contractor with the CIA at that time, saying he cannot explain why the agency would have him listed as a contractor when he claims he wasn't. At the same time, John Ratcliffe was the most senior sitting intelligence official. He was director of national intelligence at the time. They did not ask him to sign the letter, presumably because he said the complete opposite, telling me directly before the election that the laptop was in fact real and in fact was not Russian disinformation at all. Watch.
Let me be clear. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there's no intelligence that supports that. And we have shared no intelligence with Chairman Schiff or any other member of Congress that Hunter Biden's laptop is part of some Russian disinformation campaign. It's simply not true.
Joining me now with reaction is the man himself, former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, along with former House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Devin Nunes. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both here this weekend. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Maria.
Great to be with you.
John, I want to kick things off with you. Give us your take on this Intelligence Community 51 report, how the CIA contractors colluded with the Biden campaign to mislead American voters right before the 2020 election. This, of course, released this week by Congress. And Jim Jordan.
Yeah. Well, as you said, Maria, we all knew that Hunter Biden's laptop was real. In fact, Joe Biden's own Department of Justice had to admit it into evidence reluctantly. We also knew before that these 51 so-called former intelligence officials engaged in a scheme to, as you said, mislead the American people just 2 weeks before the presidential election. What's new about this reporting out of the House is, as you correctly point out, is this notion that some of these supposedly former intelligence officials were not former at all and were under contract and had relationships with the FBI and I mean with the CIA. And the reason that's significant, Maria, is the CIA is supposed to be apolitical and is charged by law under the Hatch Act and other restrictions from engaging in political activity. What made this letter okay from one perspective early on was all of the assertions that these were former officials acting in their private capacity. Now the CIA has admitted, and there's testimony here, that at least some of these individuals were under contract with the CIA, which means Hatch Act violations and perhaps more serious criminal violations under Title 18 for election interference. So while the House has done some good work here, this really requires a deeper investigation, one that the Biden administration won't undertake. And really what has to happen here, Maria, is that when President Trump is sworn into office, a new CIA director, a new CIA inspector general, and a new attorney general for a Trump administration need a deeper investigation and potential criminal referrals here. And the other thing I would say is, regardless of how all of this plays out, all of those former officials and current officials that were involved in orchestrating this should be irrevocably and permanently stripped of any security clearances or affiliation with the intelligence community. Look, you know, Maria, that we have what's called a debarment list, where we put companies and individuals that defraud the government on a list and say, you're a bad actor, you can't be affiliated or do business with the government anymore. That needs to take place with these officials, so this kind of political interference can't occur anymore. And I just think this whole sordid affair really lays open the political rot that still takes place within our institutions like the CIA, just as Devin and I experienced with the FBI and the Department of Justice with the first interference in 2016 with the Russia collusion hoax. The same thing happened with the intelligence community here in 2020 with this Hunter Biden laptop lie.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk to both of you, because I lived it along with you guys. You were both incredible truth tellers during the Russia collusion lie, and there was no accountability for that, Devin. all those people who lied and made up stories about Trump. So what, of course, they did it again. They did it again right before the 2020 election by lying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And the media takes their direction from these people. I want to show a Politico headline. This Politico headline is right after when the letter came out. And the Politico headline says this. You ready for this, Devin? Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation, dozens of former intel officials say. Okay, so they say it may be Russian disinformation. The media gets it and runs with it. Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation. Weeks before the election, that's election interference. Devin, how do you see it?
Well, what's clear is the disinformation was, in fact, those political headlines, which is exactly what Blinken, the current Secretary of State, wanted. I think there's more here, too. This goes back. We all remember the Russia hoax because we were deeply involved in it. But don't forget, this goes back to the IRS scandal. It goes back to Benghazi. And why do I bring up Benghazi? Because the two characters that supposedly were contractors for the CIA at the time that this letter went out, both Buckley and Morell were deeply involved in what? The Benghazi scandal. So it's scandal after scandal that keeps the American people keep asking the question, is the political nature of what's happening to the intelligence agencies, is it ever going to end? And I think John Ratcliffe makes a good point. It's the Department of Justice here that has control over the FBI. The CIA is not supposed to be involved in domestic politics. The only way this is solved is that there has to be a special counsel, a real investigation by a Trump Department of Justice that goes into the FBI, asks the tough questions, and then gets to the CIA. That's the only way that this will ultimately be fixed.
And I'm wondering if you two gentlemen are going to be those two who actually makes those decisions. You, Devin Nunes, running the CIA, and you, John Ratcliffe, being the Attorney General. I want to get your take on how to fix things because, look, in this report, John Ratcliffe, okay, it says that the CIA alerted the Office of the Director of National Intelligence about the draft of the Hunter Biden statement. Now, you were the director of the National Intelligence Office, so tell us what happened. Did they actually call your office and say, we're releasing this letter? Couldn't you have shut it down right then and said, no, you cannot go public with this letter because it's absolutely not true?
Well, as you know, Maria, our interview took place on national TV the day before this letter came out, where I said this is clearly not Russian disinformation. And again, this was a letter that didn't come from the CIA. It came from former officials outside acting in their private capacity. So we were told. But now we're finding out that it went through, as it went through the pre-publication clearance review board at the CIA, that there were individuals within the CIA that apparently knew this was taking place and would have known and been privy to the same information that I had, which was that the laptop was the subject of an FBI investigation into Hunter Biden for tax fraud and Foreign Agent Registration Act violations. So anyone at the CIA, that had this knowledge and participated would be the subject of that investigation that both Devin and I referenced. Obviously, if I had the authority, ability, or knowledge to stop this, I would have done that. But the CIA isn't run by the DNI. The CIA is run by the CIA director. And that's why it will be important for President Trump. And I can just tell you, Maria, you talk about, moving forward. President Trump very much wants the CIA to return to its proper role, to be apolitical, to be collecting and analyzing intelligence in the way that the silent Cold War, warriors helped us win the Cold War. And he is intent on doing that. I mean, think about it, Maria. The two biggest election interference campaigns in our country took place in 2016 and 2020 to stop Donald Trump. And it wasn't by China, it wasn't by Russia, it wasn't by Iran, it was by political actors on the left within our own institutions like the CIA, within the intelligence community, within the FBI, within the Department of Justice. And I can just tell you, that is mission number one for Donald Trump when he takes office in January of 2025.
Yeah, what about that, Devin Nunes? I mean, this keeps happening. You are both students of the intelligence community for years. How do you clean this up? Can they ever return to what they're doing. They were doing, as John just said, they were doing exactly what they're supposed to be protecting the rest of the world from doing. They were doing it, interfering in the election.
So the first thing that has to happen is the Department of Justice, all of the Obama-era people, and that's really what this is about. This is about the Obama-era people who are still running the Department of Justice. They have to be cleaned out top to bottom. The same goes for the FBI. The FBI, the new FBI building that's being built right now in the Washington, D.C. area, I mean, that needs to be stopped. The last thing we need are more people in the FBI working in Washington, D.C. That can be stopped by new President Trump administration. And then lastly, as it relates to the CIA, there's been too many people at the CIA, too many contractors, too many former CIA people, way too many people in Washington. Where the CIA is best is at the point of the spear. What does that mean? That means out abroad, actually doing their job that they're hired to do, which is to gather intelligence, to keep us safe in the United States, and to make sure that we're helping our allies, gathering intelligence so that in John's role and my old role in the Congress, that the policymakers or at the executive branch can make good decisions. So I think those are simple things that need to be done. They're kind of no-brainers, and they're easily things that Donald Trump will do.
What do you both of you want to say about the debate? I mean, how frightened should we be that we have an incoherent commander-in-chief right now, which was basically in everybody's face, the world watching on that debate stage on Thursday? Jevin.
Well, I would say this, that everybody around the world knows this. They've known it for a long time. I have long speculated that Biden was not going to be the nominee. The problem is that the Obama people who have tried to stop Biden from running for the last year, they're running out of options. And here's the problem. They had everything orchestrated correctly. They had all the people, the right people at the DOJ, all throughout the government. What did they get wrong? They can't control Biden himself. So look, right now there's a bunch of theatrics going on. It's hard for us to know exactly what's going on, but there's meetings at Camp David, stories leaking out that they're trying to get Biden out of the race. I don't know. Maybe Biden's negotiating his surrender with the Obama people. We just don't know. It's hard for us to know.
John, final word.
Yeah. Well, Maria, I looked through everything through a national security lens, and as I watched on Thursday night, did President Biden, as commander-in-chief, project strength? Did Russia, China, Iran, did our adversaries think that they saw a commander-in-chief who would, if necessary, act decisively with American hard power to protect American interests? And I think the answer is very clearly no. But the contrast was also there. You heard Donald Trump, who looked into the camera and said, Vladimir Putin didn't take an inch of land from anyone when I was president, and he won't when I'm president again. That's peace through strength personified. And I think, that came through clearly in a message to our allies and our adversaries that the last 3.5 years of the United States getting pushed around all over the globe, those days are coming to an end. And the other thing is, usually in these debates, Maria, there's both sides claim victory. This is the first time in my life there was an undisputed, clear knockout winner where everyone said there was a winner and a loser. And the winner was Donald Trump. And right now, America needs a winner. Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you. Very important discussion about what we are all witnessing in real time. Former House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe. Thank you for your service, gentlemen. We so appreciate you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.